Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
And welcome back to Meanwhile Here on Earth with me, your host, Peter Robbins. One of the most interesting parts of having the privilege of being a broadcaster on a program like we've created here with Meanwhile Here on Earth is obviously I do a great deal of reading around the UFO related subject and other paranormal aspects of our reality. And often it's books that I gravitate toward because it's my predisposition, in my focused areas of interest in the work. Other times, books come to me or are brought to my attention that I might not have picked up and read. Like a lot of us, I make first impressions. I have first impressions of things, and they're often inaccurate, as we human beings are wont to be. And a book arrived here last month that completely intrigued me from the moment I saw it. The title is Quantum Windows and Dimensions, A Christian Woman's Journey of Faith and ET Contact. The author is our main guest today, Rebecca Renfroe. And I'm going to briefly read the biographical note in here on Rebecca. Rebecca graduated from the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music with a BA in musical theater and a master's in fine arts from the University of Cincinnati. Her professional career was on Broadway, off-Broadway, and around the United States. Rebecca was also a teacher in the arts for drama, dance, piano, guitar, and speech. She had been writing music for causes, organizations, churches, and events since high school and continues to this day. She has a wonderful life with her husband, family, ministry, and performs locally. She authored her book to move others out of fear and into the reality of our multi-universe and to share a life that has common ground with thousands of others on this planet. And when I invited Rebecca to be a guest, I thought, this will be something of a special show for me. I did not grow up Christian, and although many of my friends are, and I have a great appreciation for the religion and have read extensively on the life of Jesus, I thought I wanted a co-host for this show, and there was only one person who came to mind, a dear friend, and that is Reverend Michael J. Carter. He is an ordained interfaith minister with a Masters of Divinity Degree from Union Theological Seminary in New York City, and now serves as the minister for Unitarian Universalist congregation of Swannanoa Valley, North Carolina. Reverend Carter has written numerous articles on UFOs and religion and spoken at UFO conferences such as the Edgar Cayce ARE, Ancient Mysteries Conference, Contact in the Desert, the International Conference in Scottsdale, Arizona. He is a longtime UFO experiencer as well, and has lectured extensively on the topic of religion, spirituality, and UFOs. He has appeared on the Sci-Fi channel, Steven Spielberg's production of Abduction Diaries, The Real 4440, The Real 4400, Ancient Aliens, as well as the UFOs, The Hidden Universe, which currently airs on the Travel Channel. Reverend Carter is the author of a number of outstanding books, including Alien Scriptures, Extraterrestrials in the Holy Land, A New World, If You Can Take It, God, Extraterrestrials, and the Evolution of Human Consciousness, God Consciousness, a 30-day meditation manual to God-centered thinking, and the Metaphysics of Spiritual Healing and the Power of Affirmative Prayer, and Initiation, the Spiritual Transformation of the Experiencer, which was published in 2021. And without further ado then, Rebecca Renfroe, your husband Dan, and Reverend Carter, in your case, welcome back, but otherwise welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth.
Welcome. Hello.
Good to be here, Peter, always.
It certainly is.
I love the fact that the world of connections that always taps us on the shoulder and reminds us that all is not chaos, that Rebecca and my producer and overseer of this show, Ray Hobbs, already knew each other. So I'm beginning at the beginning, Rebecca, and Michael, you are not a guest as much as a associate host. You're my co-host. So
Yes.
You jump in anywhere, please, as
Okay.
I will too.
Okay.
To begin with, Michael, although I didn't mention it, has had a long career as an actor before he went into his full-time theological profession. And Rebecca, of course, we have a sense of your performing background. As you know, I worked in off-Broadway theater management for years in New York City. And from the time I was a child and lucky enough to see Broadway theater early on, musical theater as well as live theater, there is nothing that approaches the uniqueness, the excitement. Live theater is unlike any other human activity. It's one of, I think, the highest forms of human exchange, one of the things that can keep civilization rooted in civility. Unfortunately, most people don't go to the theater these days. It's expensive as a rule, or, you've got other stuff to do. But Rebecca, may we begin by my asking you first a bit about your childhood and where you were born and a bit about your family.
Wonderful. First of all, I want to say how exciting this is to be up because I'm familiar with both of you, and we happen to watch your Sunday programs and your wonderful gospel presentations and your love of the Lord, Reverend Michael, where you were. Yes,
Thank
yes.
you.
And Peter, I was so impressed with what you did with the Contact in the Desert interview. So I want to start with that because we're here because of people like you. We're here because of Kathy Martin, who's the editor of my book, who brought all of this together. And when we watch people like children who watch those above them, all of a sudden we meet them years later. So my childhood, I was born, we actually don't know where I was born. Somewhere on the base or in a home that was near the base of Fort Belvoir in 1951. My father was still in the military. My mother was told to get on a train and get up there to have me on the base. So we actually went there, my husband and myself, and met some historians and went around. And that's how I got to know that this station hospital existed either in the Flagler Hall, which my father was the engineer architect during the war. And then we went around to locate, to possibly see where else I might have been. And all of that's still a mystery. That's how that was where I was born.
That's the most unique answer I've gotten to that question since I've been doing the show.
Wow.
What state is the base in?
Fort Belvoir is right outside of Washington, D.C. in Virginia, my home
Got
state.
it. Okay. Would you say you grew up in a particularly religious atmosphere, or, Sunday Christian, so to say, or the faith was integral in your early childhood? How?
But you see, we had everything. We were on the back roads of Georgia learning spirituals we were with my grandfather, who was a wealthy banker. Then on the other side, my dad's side, we were with the car salesman. But my grandparents, now here's what you love, which is in the book. My grandfather played the drums, and my grandmother was an accomplished pianist. So they played for all the vaudevillians coming through the Springer Opera House of Columbus, Georgia. So where I grew up, you were friends with everybody. You were friends with everybody of every culture. That's the way it was in our home. I had two separate houses. One was very wealthy and one was middle class. Yeah. So everybody got together. It didn't matter who you were or what you were from. Everybody loved, everybody hugged, prayed. I grew up in a very unusual household, but at that time, most people did have good parents. Most people grew up in a pretty solid atmosphere. You were able to practice your faith, and if you had other friends, it didn't matter what they believed. Nothing was ousted. Because of my natural born ability to see things and to have these experiences with the ETs so young, as an age, my parents accepted the knowings, the intuitives, the dreams, the visions. Wow. They accepted it. So I was not ousted, but it was more difficult to express what was happening to me with the ETs. I can say, "Oh, Mom, there's an angel here today." "Okay, Beck, that's great. What's it want? Is it helping me cooking?" I said, "Yeah, it's with you in the kitchen." Mm-hmm. Something of that nature. Or if I saw something, mostly it was about saving a life. And
Rebecca,
yes.
Can you share with us your first memory of contact, of interfacing with a non-human presence?
I believe it began regularly at the age of 7. However, the angelic and demonic realm and the shadow figures, I saw them at the age of 2. And that's the first event, I believe, in chapter 2 that I talk about in the book, where I show you the picture of what it was like that I saw. And so that kind of distinguished, oh, there's a spiritual realm. Okay, I'm a baby, but I can see these things. Then I had something happen at 10. And then, but it was at 7 that I would just keep my clothes on. It was very easy. We had 6 huge windows in our room. And I would just unlatch the window, step outside, go to the back area, and I would be prepped to go into what I call dimension with the ET. The military were there, the ETs were there, regular people were there, the generals were there. It was, I try my best to describe it as space within space.
Yeah. And you do a very good job of describing it. Rebecca, as a child, did you intuitively discern that these different presences that you were interfacing with were, for lack of a better series of terms, good or bad? Was there something about different beings or entities that gave you an intuitive sense, or overtly indicated to you that they were beneficent and positive forces, angelic, or, as you say, demonic?
What a great question. And I think, Reverend, you will understand what I'm saying. First of all, I had the choice. Second of all, they were kind. They took my hand. They showed me the differentiation of what is an angelic in that realm versus what's an ET. And that's why I tried to map that out very clearly in a bullet form as to personal experience. It doesn't mean I know everything. And I'm really clear about that. Run away from anybody who's going to tell you they know everything, because we don't. Oh, boy. So you really asked a great question. Choice, kindness, and acceptance.
Continue.
And the feeling of what I learned as I was writing all of my story was that I realized how clearly the God of this universe enabled me to have these experiences free of my own choice, and that he knew I needed kindness exhibited to me. He knew that I was going to need to see the difference between when you see a mad dog in front of you, or you see a really angry person or a bad driver, you know not to go near them. You just know it instinctively. That's an intuitive sense. But also the spiritual sense is there's a different quality that exists. We all vibrate, just like our organs do. And being in music, we all understand this, that the different vibrations create different feelings, different auras, different ethereal planes. And that was acquired just by growing up and learning it. I had to learn those. But those three things: choice, acceptance, and the kindness. It's a big deal, being kind.
We know you have two sisters. You write about them wonderfully in your book, and there's some great pictures as well. Do you know now, or did you sense at the time, that similar experiences were happening with your sisters?
No, they didn't, and I still can't figure it out. But they accepted it. Once the abilities began to develop into specifics, like I give one illustration in the book: the car, the place, the location, what was going to happen to my sister, who was in the car with her, and when she was leaving and where they were going. So my mother got on the phone and said, we've got to tell the people. They made a choice to go. My sister made a choice to stay. That's when she really believed me. My other sister was an answer to prayer, because after my brother died, I needed someone else in my life.
Yeah.
And that's when my younger sister was born. She had an experience with me later in life, Peter. It had to do with a singing engagement I had with Francis McNutt, who had a ministry here in Florida for many years. Oh, great. And
I'm familiar with Brother McNutt. Yeah, he's a hands-on. It was a Catholic priest.
yes,
He was also a healer.
well, he had a major impression on my sister that day. We prayed over her, so that was a difference. And I sat with her. Peter, so you have such good questions. She sat with me when I was writing the book, and I said, Lolly, do I have your permission to write down just a sentence or something that you experienced from that day? And she gave it to me word for word and allowed me to put that in.
Good.
And then that had to do with, she believed that his prayer, his laying on of hands, resulted in her ability, against the doctors who told her she wasn't going to be able to do this and do that and never dance again, gave her a lasting career and slowed the process of scoliosis down tremendously. And she's 36 years still in the art school, and was just nominated for her Sister Act work in what she did at the art school here.
Fabulous.
But no, they did not experience what I did, and they called me crazy.
Well, it's such a classic reaction when we're faced with an unknown that's intimidating or challenges everything we thought we knew in life. Well, you know that. Children who grow up with these experiences often develop, if the potential is there, it happens often, I've observed, before their adult years, a depth of perception and an empathy that, again, many children do not have. Also, you use the word multi-universe. Now, it's kind of a conjunction term and quite common in popular culture and science fiction, which is the multiverse. And I didn't grow up as a big science fiction writer, but last year I read a book. I forget the name, but the premise was, as we live our lives, every decision that we're about to make, but we make some other decision, that somewhere in the multiverse, that decision was made, and you are living that life, in another dimension, so to say. It's actually enough to make your brain cells explode. And it's a wonderful premise, like time travel. But as a young person growing up, first with a remarkable understanding with your parents that you can talk about these things, that they are not being judgmental, that they're not coming back with a standard parent anxiety reaction, such as, oh, honey, you just thought it looked like that, or it was just a dream. More often, parents say these things telling themselves, I'm doing this to protect my child, but they're doing it to protect themselves because the possibility that these things are happening is too much for them to want to think about. You're growing up as a Christian girl, but also, the world of popular culture is spinning around you. Do you remember that point when, you heard your first show musical or something about popular music and performance really hit home?
Wow. But it was always going on. Since I was born, music was around me between both sets of grandparents and my parents. My dad loved to sing, mother, but I think it was here again, we were coming back from a camp summer event. And we had everybody in the car. We were all singing songs and everybody was joyful. And mother pulls over to the side of the road. I forget which song we were singing, which hymn we were doing. And I started to do these harmonies, just hearing it naturally. And I think it was the hymns and being able to be joyful, being able to clap your hands and just shout and do what you want. Because see, Dad took me to the gospel churches when I was little. So when I would get through singing a nice little song, I'd sit down and then be quiet. And all of a sudden, boom, everything took off. Hand clapping, shouting, roaring. Or even if I went to temple with my girlfriends, all the way up through high school, man, you could just take off and do what you wanted. But in the Episcopal Church, it's a little bit different. It's very liturgical, but the reverence is what kept me together. So I'm wrapping everything around, and I need to get to answering your question. Mother turned around in the car and said, everybody sing one at a time. When she got to me, she said, okay, that's the voice I heard. And from then on, Mother started directing me towards other types of music. So I got exposed to everything. I would sit next to the piano and put on everybody. I went to sleep hearing Johnny Mathis every single night. And they got me a little, one of those carry around record players. And so I would open it up and put the record on at night. And I heard everybody, every jazz person, every musical theater. Andy Williams eventually became my favorite male singer. Of course, I got to watch all of the early films of every person in every musical of every race. Everything was in front of me. Yeah. It didn't matter what. I watched it all. And so I got it. So there wasn't one particular. It was all there, Peter. It was
Understood.
all there.
It's one thing to feel the love and connection with this world of music, from traditional to pop music to the world of golden age of American musical comedy or American musical theater. It's another thing to take a step beyond and say, I'm going for a degree in musical theater. That's a major step. And most people would do that with an eye on a career on the stage. Was that how you felt at the time that you made that decision to specifically study and go for your first degree in musical theater?
Yes, and I think doing The Sound of Music and then learning My Fair Lady, that was it. That took me. And when I got here, the opera singers and even my own vocal teacher wanted me to go into opera. And I said, I can't go that route. I won't be able to sing, dance, do accents, talk in other languages. And I'm going to be much happier choosing musical theater. So I'm really glad that I made that choice. And Cincinnati was the first school at that time in 1969 to offer a 4-year degree in musical theater. So my mother in Columbus, Georgia, had a good friend who lived on a plantation up there, one of the original plantations not too far from my grandfather's home.
Wow.
And so she worked it out so that I could get interviewed and specifically apply for a scholarship. Meanwhile, everybody at home was helping me go to school with scholarships, government, everybody. And then my grandfather, who was the wealthy banker, when he eventually died, all that money went to my mother. And that really helped the last 2 years doing my master's. But they offered me another scholarship to stay. And I loved academia. Oh my goodness, I loved it. So I guess the musical, to answer that, the biggest question is My Fair Lady. And I did win something for that role. And I did fly to New York to audition for it. But Rex Harrison had already chosen his person. So I went and stayed anyway and auditioned for the chorus. I didn't get in, but it didn't matter. I was still going where I was supposed to go.
Yeah. As both of you know, as your life as professional performers, and as I observed for years as a theater manager, occasionally assistant director, or assisting equity people in casting, 97% of the time, your chances of getting that job are very slim. Yep. Because there are so many other talented people applying, which the best actors I've observed would not let themselves get dejected because that's what they understood going in. And their basic strategy, as I observed, often incredibly moving, was, hi, I look as good as I'm going to look. I'm excited to be here. I will answer any of your questions. I will do a scene. I know the chances are excellent that I'm not going to get this job, in so many words, but I want you to remember me. And, you know, I remember one casting session, one open role for a summer stock production in Bar Harbor, Maine, for a play that was going to be directed by, one of the co-founders of the group theater in the 1930s, Billy, I'll think of his last name, legendary director who literally helped co-create The Method along with Lee Strasberg. And they had over 150 people apply. And I sat in an equity office for 8 hours and just observed one after the other after the other. I want to take them all back to the office with me because they all, you know, there's something about actors and making a choice that is so illogical, so counterintuitive to living a life where you can pay your bills. The amount of love and passion caught up in the world of performers for me is will always be an inspiration for the rest of my life. And I wanted to know, while this period of time is going on in your life, were visitations from non-human entities happening regularly or irregularly? Was the quality or the particulars changing in some way from your earlier experiences? How was that part of your life evolving at that time?
I wish, first of all, after watching both of you for so long, that I had had both of you earlier in my life. And I'm not saying that to create a compliment. I'm saying it because both of you hold something that's solid that I needed during this time. I was running away for many years from my ability to see the other side, did not want things to happen. I was having a very difficult time separating the emotional side of rejection that was every day in a role. So in order to stay grounded, I had to make sure that these things were not happening so much during my career time.
Got it.
But it still didn't matter. I knew when to not walk down the street because someone was going to rob me. I knew it. So I would turn around and go back the other way, or I would grab someone and start talking until the two would. This is something that was already there. And one of the things that happened, which is described in the book, about the one who had been slitting people's throats during the day, his arm was caught behind his back and he could not harm me during this time. There was an incident that took place during this time period in New York where that quantum window opened up, and I observed abduction process going on across New York City. Didn't understand what that one was till years later. So we tuck these things away. We, the grounding that I needed was so great that I had to leave New York City on a regular basis to go up to the Catskills or the Adirondacks and walk in nature. That's what I had to do. And then I got myself grounded by taking that house managing position there at the Lambs. And I'm wondering if we ever cross paths up there, Peter. I really do.
I appreciate the answer to that question because, in my job, I make certain assumptions, but know that any of them could be completely off kilter. And reflecting now on, say, that legendary long audition day, that was my impression of these people. They may have been feeling exactly the way you felt behind a wonderfully expressive face and looking sharp as heck and, doing their work there. It really is, you hear stories from now very successful actors about their early days and how close so many of them were, for all the right reasons, saying enough already. I can't live my life like this. It was a wonderful dream. I gave it a shot. I knew the odds were bad. Now I've got to get serious and find a grown-up job or a career that, maybe won't fulfill my dreams. But we all understand that dynamic for sure.
Yeah. I remember, there's always that anxiety, and it's part of the business when you have to audition to eat, to eat. And that's just, and you can know that on an intellectual level.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time for me when it shifted in the sense of it was going to be a summer stock production of Evita, and I forget the other show now. Oh, Chorus Line. And what had happened was a friend of mine was going to direct the chorus line. And he asked me to do the dance auditions, to choreograph those. And I finally got it because you kind of know it intellectually. But sitting at that long table and watching people come in, and you know how that is because you've been on the other side. And it dawned on me, these folks want you to be the answer to their problem. They want to cast that, that they're rooting for you. Yes. Sometimes you walk in and someone's eating a McDonald's cheeseburger or you drink. Oh yeah, what's your name? Oh yeah. Yeah, you get that. But basically, you are there to solve their problems. So they're rooting for you.
That's right.
But I knew it intellectually, but I didn't get it on a deeper level until I was sitting at that table. So it's always interesting, isn't it?
It is. And
it's different on the other side.
That's very well put.
The director I was thinking of is Bobby Lewis. Bobby lived into his early 80s, I think. Yeah. And
I've heard of Bobby Lewis.
Bobby,
the actor studio. Yeah.
Yes, sir. And again, he and Cheryl Crawford, I think probably Clifford Odets to a smaller degree, but Lee Strasberg created this thing called The Method, which of course nothing was ever the same after it. And so many of these actors, knowing Bobby was 80 and he was going to direct a full production of Chekhov's The Seagull. And it was $150 a week, room and board, and a chance to be out of the city for, 3 months. And the ferocity of people who wanted to work with this living legend. And I'm going to take some of your collective time with a quick reminiscence of a special theater moment for me. I was assigned to be Bobby's assistant director. I should have been absolutely thrilled, but the other play we were doing was Stage Door, made into a very quirky and affecting movie in the late 30s with the wildest pair of co-stars, Katharine Hepburn and Lucille Ball. God is my witness. And the play is a play about actresses living in a boarding house in the West 30s in Manhattan, hoping for that dream, played by a cast of 26 actual 20-something actresses and maybe 3 guys. I really wanted to be the assistant director on that play, preferably, and it was being directed by my dear friend John Strasberg, Lee's son. Anyway, I was assigned to work with Bobby, and the very first morning, he had called a read-through. We had a big old barn, it was a wonderful setup, and I don't know, there are probably 20 or so, I forget, people in the Seagull. Bobby and I were early. Every single actor was late.
Oh.
And every millisecond that passed after 9 o'clock, and I know the feeling from being a house manager, and if you have to hold that curtain for a minute after 8, you take it personally.
Yeah.
And Bobby, who was allowed to be something of a prima donna, was fuming and say, if this is the way I'm going to fly back to New York tomorrow. I don't need this bullshit. I'm just going to, this is the level. Well, I thought I need to act now because otherwise today is going to be ruined. And immediately, not so much appealed to his vanity, but my curiosity of, Bobby, while we're waiting, I wonder if I could ask you a question. Sure. You're the only person I will ever know who has been directed by Charlie Chaplin. And he said, probably true. In a film from 1947 called Monsieur Verdieu, about a charming Riviera-based Lothario, a Blackbeard, who bespeaks love to wealthy widows with no families, proposes marriage, gets married, goes on their honeymoon, where she is dispatched and gotten rid of. He will then live on that money until he needs a new source. And he keeps returning to the same pharmacy in Paris. And the pharmacist was played by Bobby. And so now he's engaged. And I said, so what was it like, being directed by Chaplin? And, puffs up and he said, well, he came to me and he sat down and he said, and it's quote unquote, you remember certain sentences intact in your life. Now, Bobby, your character doesn't talk, he lectures. I'm going, wow, I get it. This is great. So what did you do with what he gave you there? He said, well, I went to wardrobe. I chose a particularly bourgeois coat, and a tie, a shirt with a collar that was a bit too tight for me. Starched little collar, pince-nez glasses. Bobby was maybe 5'1" soaking wet. So he would look down at people by looking like this. And I remembering, the scenes in the movie and forgetting momentarily the chaos that's about to descend on us. And I said, so what did you do then? What did he say then? He said, what do you mean? I said, what were his other directions to you over the course of the film? He said, oh, he never said another word to me for the whole film.
Oh my goodness.
Well, he said, I got the role and,
Yeah.
Well, then people start showing up and he goes into kind of a cold freeze frame and we go into the hall and there's a huge circle of chairs and he doesn't say a word. People are coming in, they're making brief exchanges with each other, but they realize there is a pail on the room and they're late. The last person sits down and he reads them the riot act. Absolutely, this is not just unacceptable behavior, but if anybody is 1 minute late for our rehearsals, in the future, you can find another director. He said, frankly, I'm so disgusted with you all right now that I'm not even going to let you do the read through. I will read the play for you and you will listen. And he commenced to do something I have never heard before or since in a formal or informal theater sense. He read the entire play, character by character, with different voices for each character. And then his notes to me as his AD, I've never had so many notes in my life. He was a very 19th century director in that, even though he was a founder of the method, he felt that this play, being a period piece, step 2, this mark on the stage, wait 2.5 seconds, look 3/4 to the sky, touch it. Like, oh my God, this is anyway. These moments in theater that enrich our lives, and at the same time, you can see how they make people a bit crazy. There's something very special about meeting in the course of your work as a house manager, as an actor, as a performer, people who you admired in public life. There they are. And you can say hi, or they say hi to you, and you have a moment to chat. Rebecca, do you remember the first, it's a kind of a tacky word, but it's appropriate, the first performing celebrity that you met, and what that was like for you?
Oh boy, I'm going to have to think on that as we're sharing, because let me get there by confirming something that will round out all that we're talking about. Chekhov was the studio where I went, because that's another thing that kept me grounded, so that I would be okay.
What a writer.
Their particular method was to protect the psyche. After studying Stanislavski and all the others, and I ran there, and that's where I went. So we had great directors. That's where I actually met my first. He was from the movie. He was still alive at the time. Oh, it's the movie of the gentleman. I'm sorry. You'll have to help me remember it. He has a painting. Dorian Gray. That's it. The gentleman who would play Dorian Gray. I remember him walking in. Of course, he had had some multiple work on his face, but you still knew who he was. And it was very spooky because of the movie. And I wanted to talk to him about the movie and about what it was like to make something like that. What did it do to your psyche? But what he did was he just conducted, they conducted the classes to keep us. And I think that's why he was there for that method, because it probably kept him sane. When you do deep roles like that. So that's where I was in terms of when you mentioned Chekhov, how important it was. It was taking you back to that other question you asked me about being grounded. So, but it also, I remember, because we had Russian directors there. We also had other people from film. I'm not thinking of their particular names right now. And then I started meeting celebrity after celebrity once I took the house managing job.
Yeah.
Thrown in, all the people from television, everybody, every reporter, but of course the most memorable, and I do take the time to talk about that in the book, was Charlton Heston.
I was going to say, wonderful picture inscribed to you by Mr. Heston.
Yes. And the funny story is, when we were growing up, years before he even became a part of my mother's life, and he saw me in this show, and that's how we all met, all of us together with him there. He wasn't this there to see me. It was everybody.
Yeah.
And we were in California at the time, and we were there seeing different television series that were going on, and we were on the sets, and we took time to have lunch. And there was Charlton in, nothing much on, but a little around his waist, his makeup for Planet of the Apes. And there's my mother following him down the street. Charlton is me. And years later, she was to actually meet him and then have him in her life. And so it's amazing how these things happen and come around. So I've had a number of people in terms of, let me think of something that might, because I don't know how this, I'd like to wait till the Reverend gets back. But in meeting people, this is a good segue to go into, and a very good question, because you're going to have some of the same things, I'm certain, Peter. When we meet a celebrity, is it F.R. Abraham, who's done so much film? I just recently saw him in the story of Esther.
Did you say F.R. Abraham?
Abraham, yes.
Yeah.
He was there in the theater where I was house manager at one point, and he was influential in something that occurred. Garrison Keillor came for 9 months for Lake Wobegon, and it began. And then John Malkovich, when I was singing. So I'm bringing all these people together only because they saw something.
Yeah.
I don't know whether they saw an angel behind me, or whether I looked like somebody that they hated, or whether I look like someone they had known in their past, a former old girlfriend.
Sure.
But Reverend, I was sharing the story of when we meet people who see.
I'm sorry, someone was knocking at my door. I'm very sorry.
No problem.
Oh,
Okay.
I know you'll relate. You both will relate to this, and because I don't know the answer. Garrison Keillor stopped in his tracks and didn't say anything and stood there looking absolutely mesmerized. I wasn't sure whether I looked like someone he didn't know, didn't like. He was afraid of me for the rest of the time that he was there in our 9 months at our theater.
Wow.
John Malkovich did the same thing when I was introduced to him. I was singing with the jazz group and was invited by a director to come up because he wanted to meet me. So I'm standing in front of John, and he had the same thing. He would not touch my hand, and he fell over against the wall, and he just went into shock. So they either saw my aura, or they saw an angel with me, or I was somebody that they didn't like, and they were scared to death that I looked like whoever, maybe an old girlfriend, maybe a person who had died. We don't know these things, but Abraham was in the theater one night, and we had a particular show running, and the gentleman in the show had taken me out to dinner, and he had psychic abilities, very strong psychic abilities, and he knew that my father had died. And Abraham came up to me one night after the show, and he said, "Rebecca," and he wasn't in the show, he was there, and he knew who I was. And I've watched him for years. I've seen most of every film that he's in. And then recently this thing on Esther that was so beautifully filmed. And he said, "I want you to be careful about the gentleman who asked you out. Just be very careful that he doesn't take control over things. You have an ability." He saw something, and his kindness, I never forgot it. I wish to goodness that I had been able. So those are some of the few people who have. That happened also with Katharine Hepburn. In meeting her, she stepped away. That's a fun one. That's a fun one. I had gone to see her in a matter of gravity because I was at the opera classes on the other side of this huge campus. And I would pay my $10 and go up with my glasses and watch her from afar all during this preview time. And I would keep writing notes to go backstage, and they would not allow me to come in because she and of course I wasn't going to give up. You know what that's like, Peter and Reverend, you just don't give up. So one night they let me in, and the doorman said, in a lot of anger, "It's 63 degrees back here. She keeps us freezing. She doesn't see anybody. Who are you? Who do you think you are?" And then he says, "Go up this ramp." Well, meanwhile, I'm walking up the ramp. I'm freezing cold. I'm shaking because he's already scared me out of my boots. And these doors are opening, and and the cast is leaning out, looking to see who Katharine Hepburn is allowing up to meet her. And then they slam the door, and then the next one opens, and they look over as I'm walking up this. So I walk into this open room. She never allowed anybody to even stand on the sides of the wing area while she was in performance. So she came out of nowhere. She was wrapped just like she was from the African Queen. Small, little, teeny, warm hands like my mother, about my mother's same size. She didn't say a word. She just let me talk. And then all of a sudden, when I said, "You know, you have a God-given talent." And then that broke it. She stepped back into another section of the light, a couple of feet away, stopped talking, didn't say a word, just smiled and nodded. And I said, "Okay, so it's over. Thank you for seeing me, and have a wonderful run." The next day, it's even listed when you look it up. She fell and hurt herself and did the remaining in a wheelchair. But somehow something happened that people see something on us, around us. And anyway, Abraham made a major impression on my life. But I met hundreds of famous people. Most of them were extremely kind. Whoopi Goldberg was a hoot. Just all sorts. And we don't have to go into all of that, but did anything happen? I kept it at bay. That's the best way to say it, is that I just kept everything at bay so I would stay grounded. And then eventually left after my father passed. I knew to come home because I knew to come home and be with my mother. and that New York was no longer for me. I just felt I had worked very hard to get a manager. You know what that's like. So I didn't have to go out anymore. They called me. I didn't have to wait in line, read for movies, commercials. And I knew if I would just give it one more year, I'd possibly be where I wanted to be. But somehow in my spirit, I felt like I needed to come home. And that's when the ET, everything returned, and I started speaking eventually, and my life came back together.
You touched two nerves while you were speaking for me. One was that I worked very closely with F. Murray Abraham during the year that he was Best Actor for his wonderful portrayal of Salieri, the court composer in Amadeus.
Yes.
And I knew Miss Hepburn to a degree, spent time with her, and she was, to put it very mildly, a presence to be reckoned with. Her niece, Catherine Houghton, who we all remember as what's her name? The ingenue in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, opposite Sidney Poitier. If you rewatch that film, most people don't realize they're related, but you'd say that's particularly good casting because she looks enough like Miss Hepburn. Well, she's the daughter of Miss Hepburn's sister, and Catherine remains a dear friend of mine. That's certainly how I met and got to spend time with her famous aunt. We're going to go to break in 4 minutes or so, but to segue, Rebecca, I'm curious to know, in all of the events, the considerations, your internal thinking, developing philosophy in life, do you remember that time, in a way completely disconnected from all this, when you first heard the term or read an article or spoke to somebody who talked about UFOs or flying saucers or unidentified flying objects?
Yes, when I, in New York at different times, but it was never really discussed too much. But it was when I came home in 1990. I just surrounded myself. I started searching for people, and that's how it really began in 1990.
Got it.
Yeah. And then my mother, as you know, talked to me before she passed.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's so rare that somebody grows up having the kinds of experiences you have had with a family level of support and acceptance, not making a big thing of it. Like, butchering a Shakespeare quote, the world is not only stranger than we imagine, it's stranger than we can imagine. And there is that human hubris, that drive for knowledge, for understanding, for putting it all together, for making sense of things, when doing so is a noble undertaking, but at the same time, a bit of an existential joke, because what the heck? Just at that point where you think you have an idea of what's going on over here, you're proved completely wrong in the world of experience and human affairs. And at the same time, sometimes when things are darkest or most confusing, the universe will gently tap you on the shoulder and remind you how connected everything is and how we all are. The three of us being a good example, and race too. I think we'll wait and take our break now and come back roaring to continue. This is Peter Robbins. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth. My very special guests today are Rebecca Renfroe and Reverend Michael Carter. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Please stay with us.
This September 6th through the 13th, join with like-minded souls in the experience of a lifetime on the Royal Caribbean Ovation of the Seas as we travel from Seattle to Alaska. Internationally renowned researchers, investigators, experiencers, authors, holistic healers, contactees, spiritual luminaries will sail on an extraordinary voyage of transformation. This cruise will explore UFOs, alien contact, cover-ups, ancient ancient mysteries, the paranormal, holistic healing, and spirituality. Experience engaging lectures, one-on-one sessions, private, custom-tailored excursions, and a nightly UFO watch. The cruise is booking up fast. Go to contactatSea.com and be sure to mention the UNX Network when you book. That's contactatSea.com or phone 336-749-1219. That's 336-749-1219.
This is Margie Kay, and I'd like to say thank you to all of our KUNX show hosts, staff, listeners, and viewers for making us number one on Paranormal Talk Radio.
The UNX Network presents a health and wellness spiritually based brand of hemp-derived CBD products made by Hopewell Farm in Harrogate, Tennessee. We apply our Cathara energy work with all of our plants and products. Our products made in small batches with only 2 ingredients of pure hemp, full-spectrum crude oil, and coconut-derived MCT oil. Third-party lab tested for potency and legal THC levels with 6 strengths of 1 ounce oil to choose from. Know what you're buying and get what you pay for from Hopewell Farm. Applied directly to a specific area, Hopewell Farm topical salve in 1 ounce and ½ ounce sizes made with pure hemp crude oil, comfrey extract, and all natural ingredients. Find the Hopewell Farm link and coupon code on the UNX Network website at unxnetwork.com. That's unxnetwork.com.
Hey, UFO conference enthusiasts, we've got another great event for you in 2024. The Saucers and Aliens Kansas UFO Day in Dimension G is being held in the UFO capital of Kansas, Geneseo, on July 6th. This is a fun festival in the middle of nowhere. There will be a parade, decorated yards, costumes, vendors, speakers, and a showing of the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still. Appropriately, an 8-foot-tall statue of Gort and a statue of Klaatu will be dedicated. This will be the only museum in the U.S. with these custom-made statues. If you'd like to donate to the statue project or attend the event, visit GeneseoMuseum.com. That's GENESEO Museum.com. Be sure to bring your camera when you attend the event. That's GeneseoMuseum.com.
And we're back. Peter Robbins here. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth. My guests, Rebecca Renfroe and Reverend Michael Carter.
Yes, I've been called worse.
Talk about Rebecca's professional, sometimes, Dan, not always. It's one of the things I love about live radio. You can do podcasts and edit them and everything's nice and smooth. I like occasionally the bumps and the jars and the things that don't go right. It seems a bit more human, and you get to watch, I think, the equivalent of kind of an intellectual NASCAR race. Things can crash and burn. Rebecca's very unique and very moving book, Quantum Dimensions and Windows. And again, the subtitle, A Christian Woman's Journey of Faith and ET Contact. And I'd like to turn the start of the show over to my friend and colleague, Reverend Carter.
Thank you, Peter. Rebecca, it's wonderful to meet you.
You too.
And just to hear, the twists and turns that life takes us through, and to be able to stay open to that. I guess you probably heard this question before. I know I get it a lot, but I think it's important. How did your contact experiences influence your theology, your religious belief?
And I actually write that down as, I'm going to try to phrase it because I don't have it right in front of me.
Sure.
Let me see. That God cannot be placed within the box that we have been given in any theological background. That's number one. Number two, to be open to reading, listening to other sources that are not allowed within your theological box.
Mm-hmm.
Three is that God's love, which I believe is the essence. We all believe something, so I happen to think of it as the essence. Love is the essence. And therefore, to me, in my opinion, that goes beyond every dimension, through every wall, through every step we take.
Mm-hmm.
And it is that essence that whenever we're called out to do, be, go anywhere, I'll just use that example of you're in the boat, that wonderful example of the disciples in the boat, where there's a spirit, it's stormy, where's Jesus? What the heck is going on here? And they're going, wait a minute. So there's Jesus coming and he's all right, if that's you, Jesus, Spirit says, you call me out. Well, it's not just being called out. There's an element of love in our life where he loved him enough. Jesus loves us, and God loves us, and however we perceive in our faith, however we perceive that love, we go out when we see that love in front of us. And I hope I answered your question.
You did.
It changed it tremendously, and it still does.
No, I agree with you on all of those. And I think that what we need is more of this is my opinion, as you expressed, that we need that to be able to listen to other stories. We may not have to agree with those stories. We don't even have to believe in those stories, but just to know that there are other stories that are just as valid. I found that for me, the pushback I get or got, and this was before, being more open about my own experiences. But, I grew up in the Baptist tradition. I moved away from that. It really didn't work for me anymore. And, I'm more of, my specialty is comparative religion. The point is that by being in comparative religion, by having that focus, a lot of my more orthodox Christian friends, it made them uncomfortable because they felt that their belief wasn't as unique anymore. If you're going to say, well, if Michael's going to say, well, when we cut out the fat and spit out the bones, all these religions are really pointing to the positive part of these religions are pointing to our similarities. And however we call, or whatever we call this source, this intelligence, call it what you will. But a lot of the pushback, and this is not even because of the UFO experiences, was kind of like, yeah, well, he's a Buddhist, or, so-and-so's a Muslim, or they don't, but we really know what the real religion is. Wink, wink. We'll just kind of put up with that. But it was more that when I probed deeper, it was the fear of, I'm not right. This is unique. It's not as special anymore. and hearing what you just articulated, there was a sense of, this is what I believe, but I know there are other ways of looking at this, and those are just as valid. So it's just refreshing, and it just happens to be the thing I agree with as well.
Hearing both of you articulate this view, growing up in the Reform Jewish tradition, and there are Reform Judaism, Conservative Judaism, and Orthodox Judaism, Hasidic, which is almost functionally identical to fundamentalist beliefs that are inflexible, whether or not you're a strict Roman Catholic or a absolute, dyed-in-the-wool Southern Baptist, that the unspoken message, which I always find poignant, elegiac, a bit sad, is, yes, there are many religions, but ours is the true faith.
That's what I mean.
We have to keep a certain face to the world, because it seems awkward, it looks bad to tell everybody else they're going to burn in eternal damnation because they're not appreciating, Jesus in the right way, or, God forbid, pun intended, not even Christian. And that idea reminds me that maybe I was in the third grade, 8 years old, Sunday school, and our rabbi, a lovely man and just the right kind of person to be a rabbi, came in as a Russian immigrant and spoke with a wonderful accent we used to have fun with. Children, I have a few minutes here. Does anybody have a question for me? And he made the mistake of calling on me. And it was basically, not word for word, but Rabbi, my friends who go to St. Agnes School tell me that, heaven is like a place in the sky and you live on clouds, but gravity doesn't work there and you don't fall through. And you never have to eat or go to the bathroom and everything's always okay. And you're playing the harp, which seemed kind of boring to me. But if you're really bad, you go to hell, which is in the molten core we learned about in science class. But you don't burn up. You just burn forever. And there are devils there and they poke you with forks. Yeah. And you're just sad all the time, but you live forever, and it's terrible. What do we believe? Could have been a politician. Peter, what a wonderful question. Children, as you grow older, and you look at the world around you, the most important thing is question everything. All the questions that you ask will add to the fabric of your. I'm thinking, he doesn't know. Oh, the question was, what happens to us after we die? And my religious leader isn't sure, or so I interpret, what happens to us after we die. My Catholic friends know. Is this good or is this bad? And as I've grown up, well, still working on that, but as I've grown older, I find myself so thankful for that tradition in Reform Judaism of almost no dogma. God is love. Figure the rest out for yourself. And I entered the world very unencumbered. And I think now I've made my living for decades asking questions. And, for me, that's fine. But the idea, and again, I find it very sad. And one of the most challenging parts of monotheism in my mind of this is the true faith. And there's nowhere to go with that.
No, there's nowhere to go.
There's
no dialogue
to the same goal, and we are all part of the same family. I feel sorry for people who may think occasionally, Peter's not a Christian, but he's a good man. But what a shame that because he doesn't take Christ to be his personal savior, he will burn in eternal damnation.
Right.
Well, I'm ready to go. I don't believe in a literal hell, so I'm fine there.
Yeah.
Although reality doesn't care what we believe. A favorite phrase of mine. It's going to be what it's going to be.
No, I no. That's what was so beautiful to me about what Rebecca was talking about. And I think that, like you said, we can keep the dialogue going. And, it's why I left the Baptist tradition. I'm pretty far out even for Unitarian Universalists, but I have that wiggle room. And I'm very fortunate because I know there are a lot of ministers and academics who believe or know that we live in a populated universe. But to voice that, they would lose their tenure, they would lose their jobs in the church or the synagogue or what have you. And I don't want to be judgy about that, because each clergy person or archaeologist or historian, whatever, has to weigh how far he or she can go, because there's that. It's still a taboo subject, even though with everything that's going on with Brother David Rush and what's going on towards disclosure, it's still in many places a very taboo subject to talk about. And so that's the beauty of working with you, Peter, and on other people's podcasts, because it's like a ministry. You empower people, you get, you give them a platform, but that inclusivity. At the same time, Rebecca, this is what I believe, and this is what I hear you saying, and I'm open, but this is what I believe, and we can dialogue. We can, and you can't put God in a box. Any God that you any God that you think is not a God. So it was just nice to hear that.
Michael, I'm laughing because that phrase, "you can't put God in a box," immediately, sometimes popular culture is the only model we have.
Yeah.
That wonderful sequence, the climax of the first Indiana Jones film, when the Nazis open the Ark of the Covenant. You shouldn't try to put God in a box. And I want to segue here for to another line of questioning, which happens to be a specialty area that Michael has devoted so much of his writing and his publishing to, that hypothetical of ancient visitations of other intelligences, more advanced than we, certainly technologically, whose appearances became part of the oral tradition of, pre-biblical times, and in a perfectly, completely understandable way, were misinterpreted, because there was no way to wrap your head around what you're really seeing, as a mystical event rather than a hard landing, so to say. And Rebecca, my question for you is, growing up in a Christian family, and I'm sure becoming familiar with more and more of the Bible as you grew older, did there come a time when you read part of the Bible and thought, is it possible that this is like that, an event? And my mind immediately goes to Ezekiel, I think the most outstanding one, of somebody on the ground contemporaneously doing their best to wrap their head around and communicate to others in the future this extraordinary thing that they have seen, that it could have been a craft rather than an apparition of God per se. Does that ring a bell, or was there a point where you started to think about that in terms of scripture?
Yep. And I started at 10, and I just started opening the Bible, and it was always the questions, because no one would answer them. And mine are I do list them. I'm trying to remember some of them. And I know Reverend Mike, because we watched you on your one of the early podcasts with George Nuri.
Oh, yes.
And that one, it was so funny. Well, you were ready to go, man. You were just you were so alive. That was great.
Yeah.
I started asking myself all sorts of questions, and years later learned Bloomrich, who was involved in the lunar landing, he was tested by his son. And he came to faith, as I understand, by reading Ezekiel's vision, but realizing it was a UFO. And all of this is incorporated. So that's kind of where I was. I still am that way. I ask the same questions. Where are the giants? Let's talk about Leviathan. Who were the Nadians? If Cain killed Abel and he was sent out of the Garden of Eden, he goes to the land of Nod and he marries a wife. Well, we were told that that's the only place they had any human beings. Who were those guys over there? So it's been the same way. I look at life and death differently, and I did as a kid. I said, Jesus moved between the walls. Well, you want to talk about that? Did his atoms go apart and then magnetism brought him back? I always wanted to ask these questions. And if we're seeing our auras around each other, tell me what you see. But you see, nobody wanted to talk about that. So you have to remain quiet to a certain extent, but yet raise your hand. And then, of course, nobody's going to answer you when you keep raising your hand because you're still asking the questions. Well, how did those dead people, Moses and Elijah, go up on the mountain at the Transfiguration with Jesus? Did they introduce themselves? Did Jesus say, hey, look who's here? They don't have a photo of them. They didn't have cameras. So when we talk about seeing people who have passed on, I'm called a demonic if I share the fact that I can see someone who has passed. But yet people will be okay if they have a dream. It's all degrees. It all centers around our experience. And theology blocks us. Yes, I have my understanding of who Christ is. Yes, I happen to believe he's the Messiah. But why is that? Because I look at the Old Testament and my understanding of being a Jew comes through that line. So therefore, that's just my understanding. So my thought as a kid was, okay, so if he did what he did and he said what he said, would it be a good idea for me to know who he is before I pass over? So that's kind of the way I am. But it doesn't mean, but for me, what is hell? If you're walking in a light, if light is coming down over you and you're walking in light, when you step out of that light, you're in darkness. And that's hell to me. So the essence of, so the first thing is the common ground of everything. Whoever is right and wrong, we're not going to know it until we pass over. That's my opinion. We're not really going to know everything. So we're all going to do the best we can with what we have. And if we love one another, that's the biggest thing of all. And having experienced those who have passed over and where they are and what they're going through, I have a different take on things. So I'm not going to tell somebody they're going straight to hell. How do I have the authority to do that? I don't have the authority to do that. What I do have the authority is to share God's love. I can that example I give at the top of the book, Peter, which because you've read my book. When the ET is passing into the quantum window and he says Jesus is there, he didn't say anything. He said Jesus is there. I said, oh, okay. So it's the same thing when my brother is passing. He says, bye, grandmother. He says, I'm going. Jesus is there. I said, oh, okay. He didn't shout anything up about heaven or hell or damnation or anything. So there's a difference somewhere that lies in the love structure, in the essence of God, in our faith. That's where I am. I'm not denying what I believe, but at the same time, I'm not going to hold something over myself or anybody else, because what I talk about and where I go, I'm already a demonic to some people. I'm already.
Yes, yeah. Have you ever read of any of Betty Andreasen's books?
Yes. In fact, I got in touch with them so that I could put something in when I was speaking. I had to get permission.
Yeah, because she's since crossed over. But yeah. I still have those books here.
Good.
I knew Betty to some degree.
And Lucas, her husband Lucas, I think.
That's right, Bob.
Bob.
She, more than almost anyone I ever met, drew tremendous strength from her faith in her Christian beliefs
Mm-hmm.
and saw it as no conflict whatsoever with her lifetime of visitations. At one time, she and Bob suffered a terrible tragedy. Either one or both sons were killed in a car crash, and they persevered and went on in life. And I don't know how people can do that and not suffer every single second unless their faith in a higher presence or their ability to understand, for me, that this is not personal. And I will state a personal belief here because I'm curious about yours. Growing up, I remember always in the background of popular culture, a phrase we're all very familiar with. It's like white light. I'm a God-fearing Christian. And when I was old enough to kind of appreciate the impact of words, I thought, God-fearing. I don't fear God. I know the Bible stories of fire and brimstone, but those for me they're learning stories, they're allegories, they're analogies, they're ways of putting things to make a point. And that if I believed that God intentionally would strike down some 3-year-old, hit by a car, or, worse, being murdered, as some kind of just, I'm going to do this to see whether the parents are strong enough to persevere with the rest of their lives, as opposed to, which I think I would have trouble believing God if I thought God intentionally did stuff like that every day. The death of a child here, a Holocaust there, because it's a way of testing people, as opposed to the deist point of view that after that blast of creation that gave us everything that we have, actually allegorically, when God rested, my belief is that God, for lack of a better term, is not a micromanager, that every piece of dust passing through every room and every house is being guided, that there's a switchboard beyond belief, as opposed to there's a randomness to the universe. And bad things happen to good people sometimes, and good things happen to bad people sometimes. It made it so much more easy for me to understand the world in that sense, and not seeing it as this complex opera of vindictiveness and trials and God said to Abraham. And anyway, I'm curious your beliefs there, because for me, again, deism, which was a Christian philosophy that was subscribed to by, among other people, some of us might have heard of, like George Washington and
Ben Franklin,
Thomas Paine, Adams, Hamilton.
Yes.
That was the philosophy they followed. And again, that strict separation of church and state, which I felt was so enlightened when we first learned about it in school. You are free to practice your religion as you wish. In this country, we who don't believe in your religion will fight for your right to protect it, as long as it does not
infringe on others.
Yeah. Yes. And right now, and I have never used the show as a political platform. I have my own beliefs like everyone else, but I'm here to find common ground with people. At the same time, we all have to acknowledge that our country is in terrible trouble right now. One might see it as spiritual, but we are more fractured. We are drawing more lines. We are amplifying the differences between people rather than the things that we have in common. And, I'd love to see the whole political slate cleared and new people brought on board without histories. Just give them a shot.
Yes.
American politics doesn't work like that, of course. But one of the reasons I am so dedicated to people understanding, quite simply, we are not alone, and the implications for humanity are absolutely shattering that we are not alone, has the power to bring people together, because however benevolent, advanced, beneficent some of them may be, we probably still have more in common with each other, even if our political beliefs or our social feelings or our backgrounds are absolutely different. Is that something you encounter or reflect on in your life and work?
Are you referring to Reverend Michael or to me?
To you.
Both of you.
Okay.
Oh, well, Rebecca, you go on. I'll jump in later. This is about you. We want to keep
That's an enormous, boy, I feel like you've given me a huge box, and I'm going to open up one little section and answer it. Well, where do I start, Peter? Oh, my goodness. I agree with you on our political and what you said about history, because my husband and I are reading every morning through the Old to the New Testament in an American founding of the Constitution.
I love it.
That for the last couple of years, and we found that it was Ben Franklin who asked everyone to come together, stop fighting, and to pray, and then come back and then start the writing of what we needed to do for the foundation of our country. We actually came across the listing. It was 28 in the signing of the Declaration. It was 28 Episcopalians. There was eight or seven Lutherans, 2 Deists, 2 Dutch Reformed. They gave a list of where they were. It was very, very interesting, and how I loved reading how the faith of each person, whether they were a Supreme Court person or a president, they used the foundation of the Old and the New Testament to create the foundation of our American Constitution. And I didn't realize the extent of it till I started looking at their papers, reading what they said. George Washington said, "You cannot govern a country or the world without God and the Bible." That's a pretty strong, straight statement. And as I was looking through all of the readings of those, and who spoke first at the abolition of when slavery was taken away, and who they called forth to speak, and just all through history. So that's incorporating a basic understanding, a common ground, which I believe Ben Franklin brought back into the people, a common ground. Go off, pray, come back, and we're going to start writing again. And that's where kind of I think we need to be with our understanding of the ETs. And in a small way, each time we're on one of these presentations, one of the videos, one of anything that we're doing, you've been doing it much longer than I have. I've been speaking occasionally since 2012, but I haven't been on as long as either one of you. And I find that we are the disclosure. We are the way of bringing in the common ground. In the UFO community itself, there is great division. Some people still believe that all the ETs are just fine. But that's not what I have seen. I have seen slavery and cannibalism and just all sorts of trafficking. We have it on our planet, but they have it too. So it's a very mixture of what do we do about this? We each one of us come together. There are people in Washington who are doing it, all the groups. You're probably familiar with Steve Bassett's group and Sheehan in the Paradigm group. And of course, MUFON has been here forever. All of them. So in my small little area of the world, I hope this is answering a portion of the question. I'm only at box 3, Peter. I'm still pulling things out. I made a decision after, how do you pronounce his name? Blush, and the other 2 men came forward in the congressional hearing. No matter what. Grush, thank you. Thank you. When he spoke out, and by the end of that time, I was so angry. Nothing was left for the people. They were going to eat us. It's national security. You have to go into SCIF. We can't tell you anything. And there are these men trying to say what they need to say. And there are all these congressional people who don't know what's going on and all the money being spent. And I hang up. My friend, former friend in the FBI, calls me up, and he was as mad as I was. Wow! So I'm mad. So I said, okay, let's turn this around. Let's take the anger moment. What can I do? What's my next step? Finish the book, get it out, start speaking again on wonderful video presentations like this, and then go back to my hometown. So I had written something out years ago, a grassroots educational proposal for the public. And in those 7 pages, I outline places to go, who you should go to, what we can do, outline it for the city, get prepared. After 8 years, I'm back sitting in my mayor's office, and they're having me speak to the emergency manager. And we have meetings, and we talk about how close should you get to an ET craft. What's implemented in your managerial program? Who can I meet with around the city? What can I do on this grassroots level? So if a call comes in, and it did, they can refer it to my husband and I. And then we give them, go here, here, and here, watch The Hidden Hand, go on to a good reporter, such as Peter Robbins, go in and start looking at the movies. We've got incredible movies, not the ones that are where they're going to eat us. And that's true. I'm not denying that ugly part of our life, but I think it's important. It is for me to maintain the positive side and then go into the darker parts. And I only, as a Peter, I only mention that at the very end in the epilogue, the darker side of this whole coin. So we have to get involved bit by bit, because it's you and me. We are those moment by moment disclosure moments.
Before I turn it back to Michael, you said something that really quite moved me. First, that Benjamin Franklin, one of the most extraordinary men ever, what a mind and what an output in this world. That suggestion that in working on developing the wording of the Constitution, that there be prayer breaks. And yet also that another source of learning and organization that the Founding Fathers drew on extensively was the Iroquois Confederation,
Yes.
which is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And we, called these civilizations savage. It's truly humbling. But that even though these were essentially men of faith, or certainly some of them were, and that their religious beliefs were extremely important to them, that still, even with prayer breaks, they were adamant that there be a separation. And I find that particularly impressive, given the forces that were on them to create something that had never existed before. Michael, your thoughts on the original question there, and how it's come up for you?
Well, I'm with you guys on, just how do we move forward? And we could split the Nobel money if we came up with that today, but we do know that we have to move forward. And I think that I get it, as far as, at least I think I do, as far as the powers that be, we seem to be focusing on tech, national security, definitely have to. But I think this, at least from my experience as an experiencer, that this is bigger than that. And this is more about a change in consciousness. It's more about a change in our spirituality and how we're going to be in relationship with each other. And so what does that look like? Well, a lot of the ways we try to express that is through religion. I happen to believe that these beings started religion. I'm not saying intentionally. I just think our ancestors, these were gods. These were gods because of the technology. When you read Ezekiel, he's wrestling. How do I describe what's happening to me? So I was going to ask you this, Rebecca, but I'll try and answer it myself.
Okay.
I was going to ask, what do you think, as a person of faith, our churches and synagogues and, what our imams, and how do we push this forward? It's going to take some guts. But what I think is, and I get it, we talked about it about 45 minutes ago, a lot of people the pressure to conform. I don't want to lose my job. I got a family. I don't want to lose tenure. I know what's going on, but I can't say it. That what you're doing, Rebecca, what Peter's doing, writing books, getting out there and having the courage to speak about it. Right now, I don't think we can wait on our governmental leaders. They have an agenda. And so this is the way the world changes a little bit at a time, that we do focus on our differences. We know the differences. We know the differences. But how are we going to, and it's rhetorical, how are we going to live, people of faith, how are we going to live that faith? For those of a more humanist or atheistic bent, or just don't know, or even care, how do we get back to at least trying to reach across aisles and to build bridges instead of walls? Because for many, from my experience, for many of these beings, either they've gone through what we've gone through before and maybe destroyed their planet, or had it destroyed. They're not thinking like we're thinking around issues of race, around issues of gender and religion. According to some Palladian literature, they think all religion is superstition. We can argue, but we have to find ways, even if there were no such thing as extraterrestrials. I mean, we may get hit by a rock coming from space. New York City, LA, Florida, it's sinking. I mean, we got some real problems here, even without that. So how do we, and again, it's rhetorical, and I think we're doing the best we can with our lives. How do we bring people together? It's not going to make MSNBC. It's not going to make Fox News. It's not going to, but people out here are doing it. People, James Baldwin said that the world turns by the love of a very few people. Ooh. But we've got to focus on that. Like you said, we don't have to, make pretend that everybody's going to sing Imagine and Kumbaya. There's some of these beings who don't have our best interest in mind. Some of them want to use our resources. Some of us want to do just things that, we have a prime directive. You need to stick to it maybe. But there are other people like you, like Peter, like me. They're out here, and we're trying to make this a neighborhood. And we need to focus on, especially we got a big election coming up, issues of artificial intelligence, economic issues. Look what's going on in the Middle East and Ukraine. We got some homework. Got homework here. Anyway.
You couldn't have said it better. And you remind me so much. I did not meet him, Morgan Freeman. You're sitting there and you're just talking, smile, and you look more like him every day.
I thank you. People tell me I've gotten stopped on the street here. Yeah. I always say a younger Morgan Freeman. I mean,
I know it.
Yeah. Listen, I'll take it.
Oh. And let's remember, Morgan Freeman has done voiceover work as the voice of God.
As the voice of God.
Yes.
And
I mean, what a talent.
That works for me.
Yeah. But I just think, Rebecca, I thank you, for what you do. That's all I can really say, because we need that voice.
I'm there with Michael on this. You are a wonderful example of somebody living a life that is non-standard, so to say, and
that's a good way to
make the decision at a certain point in your life with certain factors informing it, that I'm not going to worry about the consequences. I'm going to set down my thoughts, and I'm going to keep doing it, and I'm going to refine what I'm saying, and I have a story to tell. And if it causes, some people I know, I don't know, to have some anxiety or feel a little uncomfortable about me, or just not want to be, that's fine. I can live with it. But I have put my ideas, my thoughts, my beliefs, my hopes out there in the public realm. Mm-hmm. I am now a public person, and a published author is just that. Even if it's, a moderate, quiet book. Yeah. You are now in the public realm. Your words are there forever. And if we had more people who, well, first, there's a certain amount of, obviously, you have to have the time to be able to do it and, feed yourself while you're doing it. It's not something everybody has the luxury of doing. But for every person that does it, there is one more testimonial on record that other people can go to and say, good for you, or you've made me think, or any number of variations. It's a sign of a healthy intellectual marketplace.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
one of the things that's best about our democracy. But this is a big one for so many people to get over. And it's kind of fascinated me as I've come up in the work to read in all directions, and remembering a period of time where I focused in on Christian fundamentalist publications. And by fundamentalist, I mean extreme fundamentalist, completely inflexible, completely mystically based, and unable to accommodate the slightest adjustment, because then there's the potential of that set group of beliefs falling apart. The devil rides a flying saucer, that every manifestation of extraterrestriality is really Satan and his demonic minions. And I remember a series of dialogues, even friendly debates that I had with several colleagues who were Christian fundamentalist UFO researchers. And son of a gun, if every argument that I came up with, or every possibility, they were ready for and deflected.
I know who you're talking about.
One of the things that I appreciated was that it helped me sharpen my thinking. One of the things they appreciated was they knew I always would treat them with respect, and that there'd be a camaraderie, even though we believe different things. But an example would be with the original Hubble telescope, we started photographing some extraordinary things going on in space. And there was essentially, for some years, a 24-hour CNN-like just newsfeed. The camera was on 24/7 until, this would have been in the 90s, a wonderfully eccentric Canadian researcher found a way to tap into it and just kept shoving in audio cassettes and kept editing them to find those phenomena of the most boring weather satellite that wasn't a weather satellite, or the thing coming in from deep space and making maneuvers, etc. Well, that obviously, they read we understand that, Peter, but Satan observes the same thing that God does and watches all the television channels, and no, it's like, I get it. I am hitting a brick wall with you every time, and we will simply agree to disagree.
Yes. Yeah, it's intense. You, Rebecca, you are. How do you identify religiously? Are you Protestant, Catholic, or whatever?
I just say I'm a follower of Christ. That's kind of, that's where I don't.
So I must just say Protestantism for the.
Yeah, but Episcopalian is Anglican.
Yes, okay. And I'm a UU. Our roots are of the Protestant Reformation.
Okay.
My point here being is, even the Catholic Church, for the atrocious some of the things these brothers and sisters did, the Vatican, we get it. I love Francis. I know he's trying to bring him into the 21st century. My point being that, Pope Benedict XVI, one of the most conservative popes, at least in my lifetime, he said back in 2009 that we should not be surprised when we're reading the Bible to see extraterrestrials. Now, when I first heard that, the eyebrow went up, and I said, wow, 400 years ago, you would have burned me at the stake for saying that. So, things do change. He also said in 2009 that Catholics should not think that Yahweh is God. I mean, you think there'd be great consternation about this. Even, the Pope Francis has talked about, we were baptized. My point is that as backwards as some people say they are already talking about this and have been for a little while. And so I'm wondering, and part of the question I posed, what do you feel? Do you talk to other ministers about this at your church that you attend? Are you getting pushback from this? Can you tell me what's going on? I'm sorry?
They don't talk.
Nope.
They don't talk. I'm not surprised.
Gosh.
I'm accepted, and I have a wonderful church, wonderful pastor, very strong. He knows exactly what he believes. I'd rather have somebody who heads the ship and knows where they're going than somebody who's wishy-washy and gets in a boat and you just go around in a circle. So that's what I have. Great female pastor as well. We have a strong ministry out in the community. We're very much involved. We have a Daughters of the King prayer. We've got healing ministry. It's a very strong church, very active in the community. So I'm very happy with all that we're doing.
Good.
And bringing the communities together. And we've got a strong restore service trying to bring the Black and white communities together. So all of these things are wonderful and right to my heart. They accept my abilities. I need to actually say this on record. I have two wonderful pastors. Although they may not believe in extraterrestrial, they accept my gifts.
You can't get better than that.
That is correct. But I have not been rejected. There's been more acceptance, and I wanted to go in to kind of round up something. Peter, I wanted to answer a couple of questions, and Michael, with you too. I found the essence of something, and it's just a short sentence that I wrote, and I put all these big stars in it. And I'm going to go from here and then tell the story of my mom to stay on this whole idea of what do we do, how do we get involved, answering this whole question of the politics and ETs. Where our common ground is in this. Because I remember the quote that Edgar Mitchell said when he looks out the window and he's up there and he says, I'm paraphrasing it, my God, we're all connected. And then he started the noetic sciences. Okay, I believe the essence of what lies beneath the solid matrix of us as created beings in the spiritual, ethereal, eternal part of us vibrate like the entire universe, beating like a heart. And I think that's the poet within me, that no matter what a person thinks that's listening to this, my mother talked to me before she passed. My future husband was there. My sister was there. My mother was put down on record. They were from outer space. They came to the front door. She prayed. She didn't know what else to do. And then they brought me home, and then she put me to bed. On her sighting in 2008, my mother was with a very wonderful lady whose husband had been in the Navy. He was a prominent awarded individual in the Navy, and they are seeing a craft above our home. They can see the people inside, and then poof, it vanishes. And we seem to have this on a regular basis over the home that I grew up in. And she got so angry that she picked up the phone every day and called MacDill Air Force Base. And my family came to me and said, Rebecca, you've got to do something. She said, politically and morally and whatever we can, you've got to get Mother stopped. Somebody's going to be at our doorstep pretty soon. So I called Stanton Friedman. Whatever you some people believe he was for this or for that or said this against somebody or whatever, but he was always good to me. Yeah. He answered the phone. He spoke to my mother, and he calmed her down, and we never had a problem after that. But she kept drawing it. She kept trying to talk. She was trying her best. We would stand there in the room, and that we would see the lights. We would see the ETs in the craft. She said, they're here, aren't they? I said, yes, Mother, I see them, sweetheart. And whether you have dementia or whether a person has Alzheimer's or whatever you're doing to taking care of your parent, something happened to them all the way they grew up. She didn't have dementia at 5 years old, 10 years old, 15, 25, 30, 35, 45. This was later, way too far in life. She's still having her experiences. And even before she passes, I'm standing there with her. So how do we do this? I said, Mother, it's all right. I see what you see. You're okay. You're not crazy. You never will be. You've already talked to me. It's okay. But how do we handle this politically? I said, well, eventually I'll write my book. So one-on-one, so when my mother was passing and she could no longer speak, we're all there the last 3 days. And it's a beautiful story of faith and also what happens afterwards. So we're all together in a home. We've surrounded my mother with love. It's the last 3 days of hospice, only just as the sisters there, all three of us taking care of her. And my husband is at home and my other sister's husband is next door. So she passes, and each one of us had different caregiving experiences, just like all of us right here. Peter has his row, Michael has his group, and I have my small little space that I deal with one-on-one. And so my sister and I had been taking care of her. Then my other sister steps in and was holding her hand with her. When she passes at 2 a.m. in the morning, I'm in the next room dreaming about my mother breaking through, trying to come and get me. And my sister walks up, taps me on the shoulder. She's passed, wakes me up out of the dream where mother is trying to reach out to me in the dream. I start crying, get back under the covers. I hear my mother. Her voice says, "Get up, Becky, and go be with your sisters." So there's her dead body in the other room, and she's talking to me. And there she is outside. And I'm looking at her dressed up, and she's kind of shaking a little bit, because she's out of her body. And I'm going, okay, I heard you. I stopped crying, and I went, and then we started doing what we need to do to get her buried. And all of through her life, talking with us and my husband about the ETs. And so we do little things step at a time, taking care of one another. And that's what we're doing right now. You guys are talking about the same thing. We're in a lot of trouble politically, economically. Our history is different than what we think. Our geology is different than what we think. Cities are buried that haven't even been found yet. And if they are, they're not allowed to be seen. We've got all sorts of things that we need to be talking about. But you're right. The common ground, Peter and Michael, Reverend. I should say Reverend first. What do you like to do?
Michael's fine. Like I said, I've been called worse things.
So,
all good.
Lightning will now come and strike you.
Special okay. You always make me laugh, Peter. So I think in our little worlds, we need to keep reaching out to one another. The answer is us, one-on-one, bit by bit, step by step. And then some days we push open a door and we reach a person, and that's the only thing we can do. You've got a bigger audience than I do. So I thank you for encouraging me in my walk and where I am. Honey, you've been sitting over there so quiet. Did you want to share anything with these?
We've only got 90 seconds, so I'm afraid we'll have to wait till the next show on that.
No worries.
This really has been, for me, a very special broadcast, and it's wonderful to have a chance to meet you, Rebecca, and Daniel, just off camera, you as well. Michael, I love you. A giant hug to you, my brother.
I love you, brother. I love you.
And we will be back together at some point in the future. Michael, you will, of course, be returning. Rebecca, I hope you will as well. This is Peter Robbins. The program is Meanwhile Here on Earth. We broadcast every Monday, 7 to 9 Eastern Standard, and you can find every new show on YouTube. Just go to Meanwhile Here on Earth and type in the name of the guest. Stay well, stand up for what you believe in, and have a great week.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.